County Regional Planning Commission order. Would you stand with me, please? I'll lead the prayer, and Rich, you lead the pledge. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for this time of the year and the beauty of the year, and we thank you so much for that and all the blessings you do give us. And we thank you that we can come here this morning and we can do the business of the county. We pray, Heavenly Father, that we do this in a manner that be pleasing in your sight and be fair and equitable to everyone concerned. Just be with us in this meeting. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Be seated. Call the roll, please, ma'am.
Rhonda Allen.
Here.
Richie Boland.
Here.
Veronica Buchanan.
Here.
Will Jordan.
Here.
Mike Cush.
Present.
Jeff Phillips.
Present.
Hettis Reed.
Here.
Steve Sandlin.
Here.
Mike Vaught.
Here.
Vincent Windrow. Craig Lynch.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion on approval of our March 28th minutes, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move that they be approved as mailed.
Thank you, sir. Have a second?
Second.
Have a motion second. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Anything withdrawn or deferred, Doug?
Mr. Chairman, you'll see on your tables that you have a revised agenda. We actually had 3 items that were taken off the agenda. The waiver request that was on there originally for a fire hydrant waiver, it turned out that there was a fire hydrant within 1,000 feet of the property, so that waiver was not necessary. There was also a final plat as well as a site plan for some property along Capitol Way. The design engineer for the applicant contacted us last week and asked for those 2 items to be withdrawn and probably reviewed at a later date. So we just have the one site plan on here now, the Dayspring Baptist Fellowship Church.
All right. And that is submitted for site plan approval, Dayspring Baptist Fellowship Church.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This property is located along the south side of Las Casas Pike. It's to the east of the intersection of Las Casas and Jefferson Pike. This site plan was actually approved by the Planning Commission back in May of 2008. That approval, however, has lapsed. No permits or anything were ever taken out for it. Since that time, stormwater and landscaping regulations have changed. The site plan, they're basically doing the same thing that they were proposing to do originally. So from that standpoint, we didn't have a whole lot of comments. I will say, though, that the landscaping plan, since our new landscaping regulations have taken effect, the landscaping plan that they have here does not meet our regulations. And staff is comfortable if you want to approve that, subject to a revised landscaping plan being submitted to staff. We're fine with that as well. But other than that, again, they're really not proposing to do anything that they weren't doing originally. I don't know if there's any stormwater comments from Mr. Corbett. I know that we've had some stormwater regulation changes as well, and they've reviewed this as well. So.
They had to do a couple of changes to handle the new storm regs, but it meets our requirements, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So everything is okay except the...
Yes, sir.
All right.
Dale, the front part of this property holds water. Is you know, where the probably where the driveway will be. Is it sufficient? Are you good with the stormwater portion of it?
You're talking up front of the property by the highway itself.
You know, in that flag right there. And I don't want it deferred or anything. I just want to make sure. I don't want them building the wrong thing, you know.
I believe they've taken care of that in this, what they're doing here.
In the plan.
Right.
Those new landscaping regulations, they're not for taking out like like this hedge apple and hackberry. It's leaving all that in, I suppose.
Right. Yeah, the landscaping regulations that we've approved, they do make allowances for tree credits and those kind of things, so they'll be able to keep them, for credit. So yeah, we're not saying that they have to remove any of the trees. Really, one of the biggest changes that we had on here is this is considered a land use that would require a type 1 buffer, type A buffer, which is our lowest density buffer, but they would need to show that around here. I don't think they read the regulations correctly, and that's fine. But we can take care of that. But that's the biggest change is there's no buffers around the property lines at this point.
Okay, any questions on this?
Mr. Chairman, the gentleman.
Yes, sir.
I'm Pastor Wilkins.
Come right over here, we can get you.
Sure. I'm Pastor Wilkinson, and I'm not sure that I completely understand about the buffer. Are you saying, Mr. DeMossi, that the plan that the landscape architect presented that I brought in on Thursday is not correct in what it portrays on that drawing?
Well, the landscape, I guess the quick answer is what they submitted, what they gave you to submit to us
Yes.
does not meet the requirements of the landscaping, the new landscaping regulations. It probably did originally when the site plan was originally submitted, but they're saying that this falls under a no impact classification when it actually falls under a low impact, which is what we would consider a type 1 buffer. So that's really the big thing that we can see at this point. So it just needs to be amended to show that.
Well, my comment on that is I have no objection to doing what we can, but at the same time, on the west side of the land, that property, our adjacent property owner is Dr. Pegram, a retired dentist at VA hospital. And Dr. Pegram tells me that he has tried to plant trees along his property line, and that they all died. And the reason they died, he told me, is just under the soil, about maybe a foot deep, 18 inches deep, there's a ledge of rock. And he said, you can forget the idea of getting something growing right along our fence line. Mm-hmm. And, there are places that's even on the landscape plan. I can think of one place where I know that that's the fact. But Dr. Pegram, has told me just to forget that. And I don't think that he is objecting to not having that. He is a contributor to our church, not a member. And so, he's not expecting a buffer insofar as his property is concerned. And the property to the immediate east is owned by Ernie Brown. And he just told me about 3 months ago that he'd like to put a barbed wire fence along there, or a wire fence, because he said, I'm going to run my horses over there. It's a farm. And then the house just beyond his farm is one of our church members, Sandy Foster, and her whole fence line is just grown up in trees and everything else. And so it appears to me that as a practical matter, that there will be no impact from what we have drawn in here. And as Dr. Pegram says, it's not going to grow if you put it there. That's all I've got to say.
Well, in response to that, and I understand the pastor's comments and understand where he's coming from, the regulations are clear for these type of uses. There is a buffer required. Now, there are a couple of options that he does have. If as he maintains, if he doesn't think that there will be anything able to grow on that side, of course, he would want to demonstrate that it's possible for them to submit a revised landscaping plan, an alternative landscape plan. The regulations do make provisions for that now. That has to be drawn by a registered landscape architect in order to do that. His other option would be to ask for a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals to the buffering requirement. Now, I understand the reasoning that he's giving, especially if there's the concern on that western property line that there may be problems growing some of the trees. But as far as the eastern property line is concerned, and the neighbors, neighbors change over time. These regulations are kind of outside of that. We're kind of looking long term as far as those lines are concerned. So, to me, he might want to try the alternate landscape plan. Now, that has to be approved by the Planning Commission. That can't be approved administratively by staff. But the only other option he has is to ask for a variance to those provisions. It doesn't. Again, I understand where he's coming from, but at the same time, we apply these to all type low impact type 1 buffers. So. I guess what I'm trying to say is at this point, the Planning Commission, I don't think, has the ability to say you don't have to put a buffer in.
He'll have to go to the BZA to get anybody.
If he wants to get a variance from the provisions,
tell him he doesn't have to
that's
do
correct. He would have to get a variance from the BZA for that.
And if they decided to come back and at the amended plan, they could bring that. We could still pass this today.
Yes, subject
allow them
to
to move
correct.
forward, and
That's
they could,
correct.
if they do find that that's what they need to do, they could come back and amend the plan at that point. in
Right.
time.
Landscaping, it's typically the last thing that's done on the site, so we can still let them go forward with construction with the understanding that we won't give them a certificate of occupancy until this other is taken care of. So.
Okay, what's your wishes?
Chairman, I move to approve with the, under the conditions that the landscaping plan be updated before occupancy, or the variance be acquired through BZA.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, have a motion, have a second. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, Doug, revision proposed comprehensive plan.
Yes, sir. Thank you. You'll recall at the last meeting that we had our public hearing for the comprehensive plan, and there were a number of people that spoke, and there were a good amount of discussion regarding the plan and also some of the development nodes. What we've done, we've provided a map on your table that shows the county as a whole. Also, you'll see all the insets that are on the plan. Those correspond to the different nodes that are on the plan. Kind of a closer view to kind of give you an idea of the extent of some of those nodes. We also have this on the screen, the same map, and we have the ability to bring up each individual node, depending on the nodes that you want to discuss. Before I take any specific questions or anything on the plan, I just kind of want to go through I sent y'all a packet of information email. Now, I know some of you were having some issues opening this particular email, but basically what I did was I put together just a few resources for your review on just some background material for our discussion today. I put in the Tennessee Code Annotated, the state law dealing with comprehensive plans and the process that goes into adoption of those plans. I also included a Planning Advisory Service quick note report that provides a brief overview on plans just in general. Also, something a little more specific from Planning and Urban Design Standards. It's one of the books we have in our library regarding comprehensive plans. It kind of goes into a more detailed overview of what is comprised with a comprehensive plan, the purpose for a plan. And then also, finally, I provided some information from the Tennessee Planning Commissioner's Handbook, which you probably all have at some point. You probably were given that when you first joined the commission. But also, I provided the comprehensive planning process from, again, that handbook. I thought that might be some good information for you to review. There was some discussion at the last meeting regarding the adoption of the plan. We kind of went into that just real briefly, but I'll go into that again as far as the adoption. The Planning Commission, your body has the ability given to you by state law to adopt a comprehensive plan. Okay. It can stop right there at that point if you wish. The Planning Commission also has the ability to request it to be forwarded to the County Commission for their approval. Now, if the County Commission is to adopt the plan, they're not required to do that, but they do have that option to do it. If they do choose to adopt the plan, then that plan essentially becomes a legal document, a binding document. Any land use decisions have to be made consistent with that plan. That would be the map, and I want to make sure that we don't just assume that the plan is all just the map. The plan's the map and all the other documentation that's in this document here. So this is a very important part of that, but by no means is it the only thing that is incorporated into the plan. So I just kind of want to make that clear. So that's basically the adoption process, just kind of in a nutshell. Again, I don't have a formal presentation necessarily to say. What I will do is I know there was a lot of discussion on one of the nodes.
Take it to White's all core property.
I believe that's correct, yes. You'll see what we've done based on the comments that we heard at the Planning Commission. That has been scaled back, and it's been centered on the 840 Jefferson Pike interchange. Now, something I did want to just talk about as far as the nodes are concerned. I know there was a lot of discussion about the properties that going all the way to Mona Road and all those things. When this plan was originally being worked on, the software program that was used to do the land use modeling, this map base that you have before you, is in a program which is called Community Viz. Now, it's not a program we have here, but it's something that our MPO in Nashville has put a lot of time and resources into, and we've provided them with a lot of data to come up with the original maps that they came up with. When they were doing the land use model, of course, they had to do it at a parcel-specific level because they had to base it on something. It could have been parcel level, it could have been census tracts, blocks, it could have been any of those. But we chose to go with the parcel level just because that was data that we already had, and that was data that the MPO already had from us. So you'll see property lines on here, and that's really kind of giving you the level of detail I think you wanted to see in this map. Now, that being said, I want to make sure that everybody understands that the comprehensive plan is not meant to act at the parcel-specific level. Even though this shows property lines and the data that was fed into the land use model was parcel-specific, the reason it was is because, again, it had to be based on something. The land use model had to analyze it at some level, and that was the level we chose. A lot of I've heard it referred to a lot of times in respect to like comprehensive plan, land use maps, those kind of things, as kind of like a bubble map almost, where this is really more of a, if it squeezes on one end, it gets smaller on one end, but maybe gets a little bigger on the other end kind of thing. This map is not supposed to say that just because you see these properties here in a commercial or employment kind of a node, the employment center node, but you don't see any of these in that. This is not necessarily saying that this will absolutely become that these will absolutely become that, and that these absolutely won't. Okay, this is really, again, it's not meant to be that specific. That kind of specific land use we'll start looking at when we get to the zoning of the property. When we start saying, okay, this property is going to be zoned commercial, this property is going to be zoned residential, whatnot. That's really where that comes into play. At this point, again, I just want to make sure everybody understands this is not meant, even though parcel maps are on here and the parcels are being shown and it seems to be parcel specific, the land use map is not meant to be parcel specific. So I know that kind of throws people sometime when they see the parcel lines on there and they start thinking, oh, all property across the street from me is automatically going to be zoned commercial. That's not the case by any means. So again, I just throw that out there for discussion and just for your information if nothing
Prior
else.
map came all the way to Mona Road and up like that in reverse 7.
That's correct. It did.
Right there, it took all that. So I like that a lot better, at least for comfort level for the people. I was over at the church, Jerusalem Presbyterian Church, which is right across Mona Road, Saturday, and they were all talking about what's across the road. So this does at least have a buffer, at least on, and I know this is just a rough guideline, but it does, in my opinion, give a lot more security to the people down Mona Road and back down to the golf course and stuff.
What are your mileage rings there, Doug?
The same. This is a quarter mile, this first inner ring. This outer ring here is a half mile. This, I guess, middle ring, I'm sorry. And then this outer ring is 1 mile.
Doug, and we may want to ask legal staff, but back under your comments about the county commission approving the plan, the pros and cons on that, if you don't mind, kind of explain that a little bit. And the reason why I ask is because not too long ago, in some couple different situations, we had some legal issues or some lawsuits about some properties, this and that. And one that came up in the lawsuit was that we didn't approve the plan through the county commission. And so the differences in just the planning commission approving the plan versus the county commission approving the plan, and what that does to us in a legality form of official or not official, or we can tweak it or we can't tweak it or whatever.
Right.
So if you could explain that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I've got some notes here for that, as a matter of fact. And Mr. McCreary, if you've got anything, obviously feel free to chime in. Advantages for having the Board of Commissioners adopt the comprehensive plan. Now, that before I say that, the law that we were just talking about that provides for county commissions or any legislative body, really, municipal or county, to approve a plan and to have it binding like that really is pretty new. It's only within the last couple of years where that was actually done, which I believe you're referring to. That predated even that case even predated the law. So before that, county commissions, municipalities didn't really have legal authority to adopt plans. They would do it, but technically they didn't have authority to do it, but necessarily didn't hurt anything. But the law that we're under now, again, only within the last couple of years, that gives that option in there, and then have it binding is relatively new. Some of the advantages for having the Board of Commissioners adopt the comprehensive plan, as I've just been thinking about in my own mind, at this point, I think there's maybe only one, maybe Sumner County, maybe, that has actually taken that step, and that plan wasn't nearly as detailed as this, as what they're talking about. And I could be wrong about that, but it seems like I have heard that. The Board of Commissioners, obviously, if they do approve this, they can use this plan in their deliberations and justifications for approving and denying zoning applications. If something is brought before them that, this could be controversial or non-controversial cases, if something is brought before them that meets the plan and appears to meet the guidelines of the plan, appears to meet the guidelines of the zoning and everything, that provides justification for an approval or for a denial. If something is brought before the commission that just does not meet the intent of this plan, does not meet the spirit or the harmony or whatever you want to call it of the plan, the board can use that as a good reason for justification for denying, again, or approving the plan, which, in my opinion, puts the county on, and again, I may be stepping on toes here, but I think puts the county on more solid legal footing if they're making decisions consistent with an approved plan and with an adopted plan. Another reason, I think it's just good planning. Whenever you have a plan like this, that the amount of time has been spent, the amount of public input that we've received has been put into this, I think it's just good planning for municipal and county bodies to endorse this plan, to adopt this plan, and to use it, to make sure that the plan does not get set up on a shelf somewhere. Great, we've spent all this time and everything on this plan, now let's just put it on the bookshelf. Of course, that's not what we want at all. So I think in that regard, it is good planning. Also, I think if you do adopt the plan, I think the amendment process, this isn't a document, again, that once you approve it, that's it for the next 15, 20 years. I mean, I do think that there are going to be amendments to this plan. And I think that with the amendment process that's outlined in state law, I do think that provides a very good opportunity for detailed study of any proposed amendments, both at the Planning Commission and at the County Commission level. So everybody can be on the same page with that. Do we really, what is precipitating the need for this amendment? Is it a legitimate need? Is it something that we feel needs to be incorporated into this plan? Opens it up for a lot of discussion on that. Now, a couple disadvantages that I think that planning or county commissioners may have with the plan. Some may feel that they may lack flexibility to make zoning decisions. Sometimes things come up that really aren't anticipated in any plan. I mean, it's difficult to see what's going to happen 2 weeks from now, let alone 20 years.
Sure.
So, some county commissioners or the county commission in general may feel that maybe this is a little too rigid, doesn't allow for enough flexibility in decision-making. Also, the amendment process, and I will say this, as it's identified in the plan, is fairly time-consuming. There has to be, if the county commission adopts it, there has to be a public hearing before the planning commission with a 30-day notice. Also has to be an amendment or a public hearing before the county commission with a 30-day notice, similar to the plan that we have for adoption, similar to that process. So, I mean, that can be time-consuming. Now, of course, I feel that
You're saying for amendments.
for amendments,
Yeah.
right? I mean, really, the amendment process is the same as the adoption process. It doesn't really differentiate it in the state law, but of course, I guess I would counter that by saying anytime you're going to make an amendment to a comprehensive plan, it's not something you should just do on the cuff. It needs something. It needs a lot of study and everything. So that's as I see it. There really isn't a guidebook out there at this point that says you should do it, you shouldn't do it. These are just as I've been thinking about it, some of the thoughts that I've come up with.
So you're saying the county commission should approve it?
As a planner, I think that just makes sense.
Yeah.
Doug, I have a question on that. If we send the plan to the county commission and ask them to adopt it, can they change it?
Yes,
Do they-
I believe they have
Is it a pass, fail, here it is, you like it or you don't as is, or they're allowed to change it?
I believe they're kind of similar to what you all are doing with the steering committee. I think they can make some changes now. If they become if the changes become so big, at that point, and where do you draw that line? That's difficult to say. But if the changes become too drastic, in my opinion, I think that you should bring that back to the planning commission for another review by the planning commission. So but if they just say, if they look at it and say, well, we really think that this, kind of like what we're doing, this tweaks just a little bit, there's a line in there where it's a minor change versus a major amendment. Again, it's not hard and fast where that line is, but I believe they can make some minor changes, but anything other than that, I think would have to be brought back to you for your review.
If the county commission,
I'm sorry.
if the county commission approves it, and like there's something comes up out in my district, it's 840 in Sulphur Springs Road, and there's no note at all there.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody comes in and wants to put a little commercial use there. Would that require the plan to be changed?
You see, I don't really think so. Again, this plan is not meant to be as specific as saying
I was under the
only.
impression if the county commission approved it, it becomes a lot firmer of a
It does.
document.
It
you know,
does.
and then we
Right.
have to adhere to it strictly.
Mhm.
And so that would mean we'd have to go back and amend it to put something where there's not a
Right.
commercial.
Well,
note.
and understand this. Just one thing. These character areas that are identified in here, suburban and urban, especially like that area you're talking about, Sulphur Springs and 840. There are provisions in this plan, and that's characterized as an urban area. That
I was
does-
just picking out as an example.
Right, I
there.
understand. I know, but and this would apply anywhere. But there are standards in here that for the different character areas for urban that do say, okay, general urban character area, you're looking at roughly, as a recommendation, 10 units an acre. But also, it makes some recommendations in here for floor area ratios for non-residential development. Just because it's not in a node, that does not mean you cannot have commercial development even out in these other areas outside of nodes.
I want to get into a position where we had to go back and amend this thing every time
Right.
something comes down.
Right.
Somebody wants to put a convenience store or a barber shop or something
Right.
like that.
Now, along those lines, if something comes through and somebody wants to put a major industrial park
Yeah.
in that area,
Well,
okay, you might want to think about that.
There.
Right. But, and I know I'm just using it. You're right, but I'm just kind of using an example. But if somebody wants to open just a small retail shop in that area, I don't think that goes against the general urban character area because it makes recommendations in here for non-residential type development, even outside of nodes. It doesn't have to be in a node to be commercial. So.
Doug, I've got a question. Right now, we're using this is meant to be a tool.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So what you're saying, if it goes to the county commission level and they approve it, all of this becomes in concrete?
Yeah, well, it's still used as a tool, but essentially what we're saying is any zoning changes, land use decisions have to be made consistent with the recommendations of the plan.
Oh, okay.
It becomes more, it's not as detailed as zoning, of course, but it still comes with what is typically called concurrency or consistency. It has to be consistent with the plan. I guess consistency is really a better word, but there has to be whatever decisions are made have to be in harmony with the recommendations that the plan makes.
Let me ask you a clarification question then. If we
elect to send it to the full commission for vote, and they vote for it, any amendment going forward, does the planning commission still have?
Yes.
Does that still come to us
Still
first?
come to you first.
And can we vote it up or down? Or,
Yeah, it would
or
just
is it
be-
the fact that they have voted on it and put it in, quote, concrete, as you say?
Comes
then
in first, and then it
Right.
goes to.
It would be like it'd be kind of act as a zoning change at that point.
Okay.
You know, it could come to you. You would make your recommendation as to yay or nay. You would send it to the county commission, and then the county commission would have the final say based on your
right,
recommendation.
so we
Kill a zoning change. Is that what you're saying? If we
Well,
say
I-
no, does it die? Well, we could say no to it because the county commission still could approve.
Right.
Okay, so we still have first touch on everything
you still
in
have first
terms
touch.
of any amendment
That's
changes or
correct.
anything like that?
That's correct.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
can I ask Mr. McQuarrie
Sir.
the legality part, if you don't mind?
I was headed that away. Thank
Josh, if you
Brother
come to
Shannon.
the mic.
That's where my next question.
Like I said, it's been a couple years ago, but where I was brought up, well, it was really kind of shocking. Our land use plan that we thought we had approved wasn't actually approved because it didn't go through the full commission. And what I'm wanting to do is, okay, we're doing all this work, like Doug was saying,
Right.
and for things that's still going to pop up, not foreseen, of course, because there's going to be changes, there's going to be growth, just like there always has been, and we're never going to have a perfect plan. But does this need to go before the full commission and be approved and set in stone, so to speak, to help us in the legalities down the road?
Well, I'll respond to that in two ways. First, I'll say that I think everything Doug said is right legally in terms of the sort of the legality of things if it goes to the full commission and is approved by the full commission. Whether or not that ultimately is a better policy decision, I think is something you guys will have to decide.
Mhm.
I think keep in mind that sort of live by the sword, die by the sword. So certainly if it goes to the full commission and is approved by the full commission, then it becomes binding to the extent that the issue that's coming forward is addressed. So like Doug was pointing out, if there's flexibility in the plan, using Will's example a few minutes ago, there still may be some ability to approve or not approve something that's consistent with the plan, whether or not there's a node and so forth. But using maybe an extreme example, if we have an area on this plan that is residential and somebody wants to put a huge manufacturing plant, you will not be able to approve it, no matter how good an idea you think it is,
Right.
without amending this plan.
Yeah.
Period. Because you have approved the land use plan and it will be binding at that point. Now, is that good? It is, as long as we're making decisions consistent with the plan, because it helps eliminate the ability for folks who don't like the result of the vote for us to defend that decision, because it's consistent with the land use plan that's gone through this process. So I think that what becomes important is reviewing the land use plan very critically, as you guys have done, and make sure that it's consistent with what your wishes are going to be, because you are going to be bound by it to the extent you don't amend it. You can amend it, as Doug pointed out, and we'll have to go through the same process that you're going through now. The question was raised whether or not the county commission could amend this plan without sending it back to the planning commission. I think Doug was exactly right on the law on that. The county commission, if this goes to the county commission, could make slight modifications to the plan, but if there's any material, substantial suggested change at the county commission level, it needs to be sent back to the planning commission for amendment. There have been circumstances, Commissioner Sandlin, I think in the past, where having a land use plan that was clear and if decisions were made consistent with that land use plan, it may have been beneficial in terms of defending the actions taken by the county.
Well, I think
more directly to your
I think the different land use plans that we still have, and we adopted through the planning commission.
That's right.
But we didn't actually adopt them through the full commission.
Right. And
which the difference in legalities evidently are
substantial.
Yes.
If we just pass it here, it's nothing more than a tool. It's an expression of intent, if you will, but it's not binding on anybody. It's a good tool. It's something to refer to. It's something that has value in your planning decisions, but ultimately you're not obligated to stick by it in the future. So, you know, it's hard to predict whether
Unless
or not
it's
that's a good
adopted
thing.
by the full commission.
Unless it's adopted by the full commission.
Well, I
Then
think,
you're bound by it.
and that's what I'm getting to, because I think if you do all this work and spend all this money and all this time and effort in the public hearings and have Rutherford County to speak out on this thing,
Right.
then, and nothing's ever going to be perfect, no matter what, and we're going to have to do some revisions down the road, no doubt, as our county grows in the different areas that it grows, and there will be tweaks and things that we'll have to do. But I don't see that being an issue, even if it's out of zone and something major's coming in, for us to go through the process and tweak it to where the community's involved with it, as well as the planning commission and the full commission.
Mm-hmm.
And you've still got a good plan. You haven't broken down the plan. And I'm not going to be on planning forever, and so this gives other future planning commission members and directors and everybody still the same guidelines to go by, and whether we're here or not, here's what we've come up with, and here's your tool to work by and stick by. And that also gives the residents of Rutherford County ease of saying, hey, we understand you're going to stick by this. And if there's a modification, then you're going to go through the process, you're going to notify us, and we're going to have input on it as well.
It is important, as maybe a final comment there, it's important, I think, as Doug has pointed out, to keep in mind that the land use plan we're talking about now and the zoning resolution are two different things.
Right.
And you could
Right.
have something that is going to qualify under the land use plan but still doesn't meet the zoning requirements, whatever they wind up being.
Right.
So this is one part really of two that will work together in future land use.
Right.
Is there any benefit to the county for us to send this to the county commission if we are sued because of a denial or an approval? In other words, is it better for the county or worse for the county?
Well, I
Or
guess
can
that
you
would
can
depend
you
on
even
whether or
imagine a
not the
scenario where
approval-
there's a difference, maybe?
Let me say it this way. I'm going to start with the assumption that if the county commission approves this land use plan, that future decisions are going to be consistent with the plan. And if that is true, then I think having passed the plan through the commission helps the county.
Yes.
Because we'll be able to say we acted consistent with a plan that was approved and adopted through this process.
Okay, Josh, we talked last meeting to the neighbors out there up and down Mona Road, how this was just a tool, just a
Right.
map, nothing set in stone. If this goes to the commission, it becomes set in stone to a great extent. Say that little sliver of purple on the right side of the core property there, we approve this the next 60, 90 days, however long.
Right.
A little shortly after that, somebody comes in with that property and they want to put a manufacturing plant there. We have less ground to turn them down once this has been set in stone, I would think. I mean, we may think the road's not ready, the time isn't right, but if this is approved and that is purple, then are we not, I mean, I'm just thinking both ends of the sword you mentioned a minute ago, and we have less ground to turn them down,
I think
because
that-
this is.
I think you could anticipate that a person in that scenario, the applicant, part of their position is going to be, this proposed use is consistent with your land use plan. And at that point, I think you're right in that you're going to be kind of moving to the zoning resolution to determine whether or not the proposed use, although may be consistent or within the parameters of the land use plan, does it still meet all the zoning requirements? And it may not. And so you still very well may have a valid basis to deny it, but it won't be because the land use plan doesn't permit it. It will be because it doesn't meet the zoning requirements.
Yeah, I don't think, just to kind of dovetail on that, I don't believe personally that this document just provides like an automatic pass, if you will, for rezoning just because it may be in an area that is identified in one of the nodes. Like you said, you know, using this example in this area, if something were to come in And, okay, yeah, the argument may be, well, yes, it's consistent with the land use plan, but just because it's consistent, it still has to meet whatever criteria we come up with for rezoning applications, special uses, whatever you want to, however it ends up fleshing
That
out.
could be one of
So-
6 points it's got to meet or something.
Exactly, right. Okay, great. It meets the land use plan. Okay, that's fine. Okay, moves on to the next step. Does it have adequate water? No. Are they going to be able to get water there? Probably not. Does it have sewer? No. Do they need sewer? Yes. Are they going to be able to get it there? No. Okay. Does it have roads? No. Are they going to build roads? No. I think under that circumstance, I still think that even though it may say, the plan may say that, yes, this area does anticipate those kind of uses, I think you still have the ability and the justification to say at this point it's just not ready for that kind of development yet, despite the fact that it's shown that on the land use plan. This is a future land use map, not this doesn't give just anybody who comes in with a rezoning just an automatic pass just because it's recommended that way, that I can automatically get a rezoning just because of that. If it meets it and everything else in there is fine with it, it has the infrastructure, it has everything, it seems to make sense, yeah, I think that's fine. But if it doesn't, then, this in and of itself isn't enough to just approve a rezoning, I don't believe.
Let me, this committee that has worked on this has spent almost 2 years, and it's been a cross-section of people across this county that has served on this committee and spent hours working on this. And I think they have looked at it in a way of a betterment for the entirety of Rutherford County. And what we've gotten into here is, can we please everybody of, say, 260,000 people? And it's hard to please everybody at one time. And I think they've done a pretty good job here of trying to find what's the betterment for Rutherford County. And I think what Josh is trying to say here, by what the plan we have here, it gives the county commission an opportunity to say, this protects not only Rutherford County, but the people of Rutherford County. And what we're trying to do as far as saying, this is what we can do here and can't do here. But yet there's a way within the law, if we need to change it, to amend it. But we have to go through the proper channels. Am I right in what I'm trying to understand here by going to the county commission? If we keep it with here in this planning commission, it becomes back another method of what we can do as a commission here to twist and turn again with whoever shows up here and what we do. But yet if we've got, when we build a house, we have a set of plans to work from. And I think if a county has a set of plans to work from, we can build a pretty good plan. County. I know people say, well, I've moved from here to here to here to get away from that and that. I know David Crockett once said one time that whenever he moved, he moved because he could see his neighbor's smoke coming from his chimney. Well, we can't do that anymore, and we have to look at what is the betterment for Rutherford County. And I think this committee, I know myself, before I ever got on the Planning Commission, I watched the paper and I saw when you had opportunities for the community to come and listen to the committee meet, and I did. I went to see some of those and hear some of those, not as a member of the Planning Commission, but just as an opportunity to hear what you was doing. And everybody in this county has had that opportunity to do that, and now we're down to this point right here of looking at it, and everybody says, oh, my house is on there. Well, that's true. Well, now we're down to a point of protecting everybody's house and everybody's piece of property, but most importantly, I think we need to be looking at we're protecting Rutherford County and the people. And I think that's what we've got to decide here. And I think that's the decision we've got to go with.
I have another question for Josh. On this map, we differentiate between a rural center, a village center, and then these purple ones are employment centers. And, the people that came up and spoke 2 weeks ago, they were concerned about, the industrialization. Are we setting ourselves up? Is there any difference looking at the plan if we differentiate? In other words, an employment center is more apt to be or less apt to be zone commercial or no difference? Or should we differentiate on this plan?
Josh, I can kind of go ahead.
You can go.
Legally, and I'm
from just the plan standpoint, the rural centers, of course, the smaller rural centers are anticipated to be kind of more of a mixed use kind of area, residential and commercial uses. And the village centers the same, maybe a little more intense, but the same kind of philosophy there. Of course, the employment centers are those are forecasted to be probably higher intensity than you would see in the rural centers as far as any
and
commercial
they all three
industrial
make sense
development.
because they're all three on an interstate or interstate type.
Right, and that's
highway.
why. Right, and that's the reason that we put them where they were, or that the committee put them where they were. Now, I guess I'm not sure from a legal. I'm not sure if I understand what you're saying. Should we differentiate between them? Is that what you're saying, or?
Is there any difference between our ability to approve or not approve based on what color these maps are, these centers on these maps?
Well, there is, to the extent that whatever the proposed use is needs to be consistent with the use as identified by colors on this map. I don't know of any legal obligation that requires any particular titles, employment center, industrial center, or anything else. Those are the creation of the consultants in consultation with the staff and so forth. There's no legal obligation that any particular, divisions be made. If that's responsive to your question. So I think you could theoretically combine some of those, or you could divide them out. It makes sense, I think, to me, from everything I've heard, to divide them out in the way they are, because it's going to help long term in planning and identifying what does or does not fit within a particular area. Is that responsive?
Yeah, and I'm not sure it's a clear question anyway, I look at, the one that's up there, and then I'm like, you see that parcel that's to the right of the core property, and
right.
We've set a boundary here, whether we wanted to or not, that is parcel specific.
Mm-hmm.
And now we've gone, on away from. I'm like, if somebody comes in and a couple of years and says, I want to put an industrial park there,
right,
or some type of employment center there, then do we have the ability to turn it down? I guess is what I'm saying.
And I think that kind of goes back to what Will was asking earlier.
It's related. It concerns me a little bit.
Yeah, just because it's identified on the plan as being in a particular node does not give, and that could be any of these nodes. It does not give it an automatic pass for rezoning.
I think back to the ladies, particularly the ladies that that spoke at the previous meeting.
Right.
Then they were concerned. I think now that we've identified it parcel specific.
Right, and again, I want to make sure
become more justified.
Right, but again, and I know we've said this. This, even though this map is showing parcels, this plan is not meant to be. And I know you understand that, but you don't. Any kind of a zoning change or anything automatically, again, this doesn't become an automatic pass for that. You still have to consider the character of the area, the surrounding area. Does it make sense to have the zoning? Does it have the infrastructure needed? All that still comes into play with the zoning changes, and that's something we'll be working on the next phase of this when we do the zoning map and the zoning ordinance.
Then let me bring up an example in my area. And as I remember the Las Casas plan, the area across from the new school entrance and adjacent to the old Las Casas school was identified as potential commercial. Yet it was tried to be rezoned, a couple of years ago and was not successful. So, it still allows, even though we're on here, it still allows amply for community input.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Josh, I have a question, kind of a follow-up. We know putting this map in front of the county commission, or the full plan in front of the county commission for adoption, is just step one. Step two is going to be when we begin to rewrite the zoning.
Right.
Is your answer the same in terms of how they can change and manipulate that zoning document we put in front of them? Is it the same as when we put this plan in front of them, that there can be no material changes to the zoning without it starting back over with public input?
Yes, it's the same. There's several cases out there on that very question. The names slip my mind. There's one out of Rutherford County, maybe Edwards versus Allen, maybe the name of it, and it deals specifically with that issue. To what extent can the county commission change a proposed zoning amendment without sending it back to the planning commission? And of course, it's like most legal decisions, it's not real clear. There's no bright line, but it is basically what Doug said, and that is, if it's a material or substantial change, it needs to go back to the planning commission because the statute requires that all zoning amendments originate with the planning commission if there is one. And so they can make modest modifications that I guess an objective observer would not deem to be material without sending it back. But if there are substantial modifications, they need to come back through this body.
Okay. And just for clarification, for this group, the reason that I keep asking these questions is because the last thing that I want to do is to have us send forth a plan and then have changes be made on the fly on the commission floor that are not consistent with what we want or with the 2 year previous work of this committee. So that's the reason I just want to make sure that as it moves along in the process, I just want to make sure that it's not going to be significantly changed from what our expectation is and all the expectations of people who've done work leading up to this point. So, thank you.
Doug, so when the county commission makes a change, if they decide to make a change, what is the protocol? We come back, we got to review it and approve. I mean, what is the protocol?
Yeah, if this goes to the county commission and they make what we deem to be a substantial change that needs to be brought back to planning commission, we'd probably go through the public hearing process again, to have the 30-day notice, public hearing before the planning commission, recommendation made, 30-day notice, public hearing before the county commission. It'd be the same process.
Okay.
And Doug, when you say we deem, is that staff deems that it may be a bigger?
It would probably be staff in our legal team kind of deciding that. I mean, like Mr. McCurry said, there's no bright line as to where that line is, but after seeing what they want to change, it's hopefully one of those where we'll recognize it when we see it, kind of thing. If they're saying, if they're just saying, well, I think this node's too big, scale it back a little bit. Okay, yeah, we can probably live with that. That's probably not a big issue. But we want to put a couple extra nodes in here. We want to remove a couple nodes, something that, would be a substantial impact that someone may look at it and say, I wish I would have had a chance to comment on that before you all did that. Then something like that would need to be, I think, brought back.
So it's safe to say that between staff and the planning commission, we still maintain our watchdog status
Yes,
on the plan.
I think that's very accurate to say. Any changes that are made, even let's say that this is adopted ultimately, any proposed amendments start here. Okay, well, I mean, they probably start with us first, and then they probably come to us and say, this is what we want to do, and then you'll get the first crack at it, as far as looking at it and making your recommendation to the county commission at that point.
Doug, the little sliver we keep talking about, the purple sliver up there, if it's two parcels over, it does meet it won't be in the correct color coded area, but it does meet those 6 criteria, the possibility that we might have. So that's still a possibility.
Well, yes, and that goes back to this. This is not a parcel specific map. If it's like let's just say for the sorry if I just took out somebody's eye with that. Let's say let's just use this example. Someone's got this property here and they want to develop it, even though the land use plan, it may not be colored, quote unquote, because this is not a parcel specific map. I still think that falls in the same area as that employment node, and I still think would meet the criteria of the plan, but still has to meet the zoning ordinance criteria, whatever those end up being when we're finished with that process. So.
Okay, another question, Rich.
What if it's outside that ring?
If it's outside the ring, again, the rings I think were put in there, just more as a, kind of just a radius, kind of giving you an idea. Again, if you have a piece of property that's right outside of this ring, personally, again, being that this is not parcel specific, does that still meet compliance with the plan? I would argue that it probably does. Even if it's right outside. Now, if you've got, I can't bring the map up. It's one thing if you're right in this area. It's a whole other thing if you're like a mile down the road and want to do it, or even a half mile or quarter mile down the road. Then you might, that's probably getting a little too far away from that anticipated node area. But this is just kind of giving an idea of how far that area could extend. So again, this is not, just as these aren't meant to be parcel specific, I don't think this is just a hard, fast boundary either. The plan is just not meant to be that specific. So.
Let me just ask a question. I've developed a lot better feel for the county commission adopting this plan. I've had some misgivings about that because when when this body, I think, approves something, it's not as, it's not as political as it gets when it gets over to the county commission. That's probably not the correct wording, but over the county commission, you got 21 people who are specifically elected by a neighborhood or neighborhoods. And you could have a dozen county commissioners that want a dozen things changed on this plan specific to that area. And you're getting right back to what Pettis was saying a little bit ago. It's protecting turf instead of looking at a bigger picture.